How you doing? You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Brian Wolatz. That's Brian with an I, Wolatz,
Hmm.
and I'm an author, debut author. You can go to my website, brianwolatz.com, same spelling, and check out my book. It's going to be released on February 4th. Um, you can get it really cheap. You can search it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, your indie bookstore. If you want the ebook, it's on Kindle. But basically, the reason I reached out to you, I've actually been a fan of yours for some time now. Um, I recently got back into you about maybe a year ago because I you started showing up more like my YouTube recommendations because you're doing politics stuff.
Hmm.
But actually, I used to watch you all the time in 2015. I worked in a call center, and between calls we could like watch streams and stuff. So I would watch like you and Cutie Pie and Gross Gore and other streamers during the day. So I've
Okay,
been familiar with you for quite some time.
cool. Awesome. So what exactly is it that you do now then?
I'm a software engineer,
Hmm.
so I do all the everything from front end, back end development, database management, DevOps, which is like development operations, like deployments and stuff. I was actually up like last night doing a deployment at like 1 in the morning of new code. So that's like my job now. And I wrote this book because it was probably about September 2018, and I was kind of watching the political sphere that was happening, and I realized that with all this talk and interest in technology, nobody's really talking about technology. Like nobody is really talking about the huge shift in society that technology is going to bring to us. Um, and we're still just, it seems to be bickering about things like partisan politics and things like, I mean, at that point in time, just thinking back, that was like in the middle of like the Brett Kavanaugh stuff. So partisanship was at a really like all time high, and I'm not like a partisan person. So yeah, that was really frustrating to me. We were at like the brink of a midterm election, and nobody was really talking about this. And it was actually um, what would you want to say, polled that after that election, somewhere around 80% of people wanted data privacy to be like a key concern of this current Congress.
Hmm.
And there's been almost no movement on a national level, and that's just one aspect of technology, the data privacy thing. Uh, and what we've seen instead is a bunch of states starting to do that, and again, I'm just talking about data privacy in this. We don't want a situation where there's 50 different anti-data collection laws because we just aren't ready for it on a national level. So I wrote my book. It goes over a bunch of threats to societies, or a bunch of threats to our society, based on where technology is headed.
Okay, so I guess what are some problems that you think that we're ignoring technology-wise right now that we should be paying greater attention to?
Well, I think that there's threats to just about every aspect of our society. So things like, let's just say, like for example, threats to our economy. Not
Hmm.
only do we have things like automation, which has the potential to take out 66% of jobs
Hmm.
in the next couple decades, which could be a good thing. I mean, if we have the right economic structure, then automation is necessarily like a really good thing. It's literally humans not having to do things. There's no way that humanity doesn't benefit. But when you um, sorry, when you have our current economic tax, whatever structure, societal structure,
Hmm.
and you introduce this huge thing of automation, all it's going to do is displace power to the people who own things like capital and businesses and everything. And it's not actually going to help the poor and the lower class and the middle class
Yeah,
of
so like what's
America.
like I guess like so what's like one proposed solution you'd say for like some of our problems? Like what's a one path forward?
Well, in terms of automation, we just need to start thinking about. how we want our society to actually be structured. When we have these things like robots that come in and take over people's jobs, who do we want to benefit from that?
Well, yeah, that's what
Because
I'm asking, I guess. It's like when you say how do we want our society to be structured, like what do you mean by that? Like how would you change
well,
it?
in that case specifically, we'd be talking about the economic structure, the tax brackets, the how we tax things like corporations, value added taxes, that sort of thing.
So then the prescription is basically just like higher taxes, or
Well, precisely. Well, higher taxes on some people. Right now, there's about 150 million Americans who work, and there's about 150 million Americans who are on who take some sort of social benefit. If automation were to happen tonight, let's say, and 50% of the jobs went the one way, you'd now be looking at something like what would that be? 225 million people who need social benefits and 75 million people who are working. And right now, 85% of our tax income comes from tax revenue comes from income taxes and sales taxes. Only 7% of it comes from things like corporation taxes. So we just need to take a whole scale look at where we're taxing things and where the government is getting the revenue to fund social benefits, so that things like automation are a benefit to everybody. And again, this is like, I'm not an automation guy. Like, automation is like maybe a 20th of my book. There's
yeah, I guess
another economic thing that we have to look at is surveillance capitalism, which surveillance capitalism is it basically is the idea that in the future we won't sell products, we'll sell like advertisements. So instead of having instead of the main point of commodification being like, I made a sandwich, do you want to buy the sandwich? It's going to be, I'm going to sell you the economic decision that this person will buy a sandwich if you offer it to him.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is like, what is it sounds like, so typically we identify a problem and then we have like a set of solutions for said problem, right? That's like the two part of like if we're going to write a book on like, we have problems about society and then these are things we have to fix it. So I'm trying to figure out, I'm just curious what your proposed solutions are. Because right now it sounds like you're basically just giving us like a progressive tax plan, basically. Like people that make more money should be taxed more, whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, the economy is like one of many things that are at risk here that could be lost to the modern and evolving world of technology, to the digital age, you might call it. That's not the only thing that my book is about. And just to clarify, there are prescriptions here. I mean, I don't go in number by number and say we need to absolutely make this level value added tax and we need to tax robots at this amount and everything, but rather that we just need to be aware of the whole scale thing that is happening. Now, in terms of surveillance capitalism, that was about automation. The surveillance capitalism portion of it, we absolutely I think that should just be banned fully.
Wait, which part? What do you mean?
Banning surveillance capitalism?
Yeah, wait. So when you say surveillance capitalism, what exactly do you mean by that?
So surveillance capitalism is an economic structure that is based around the data that we have, and it basically centers the individual person as its own economic data point, and then that person can be offered things and they will buy them, they will use their money to purchase them. And we know this because of an extremely personalized data algorithm.
So you would ban
so that's what
essentially
surveillance
like
capitalism is.
all internet advertising, or?
Well, it wouldn't just be internet advertising. So this is from Google's chief economist. This is what he describes as surveillance capitalism's tenets. First thing you got to do is you got to create these data structures that get every possible aspect of a person's life into a computerized data set. So this is why like Google's buying things like health records. This is why Google's buying things like, it just came out today, Google's buying Ring data from Amazon, and the Amazon Ring, Google's buying data from that. This is why companies like Facebook have patents to track your car as it moves through a city based on what Bluetooth networks it is visible to. It's all about just getting as much data as possible.
Yeah,
The second tenet of surveillance capitalism is you want to create new contracts with new forms of monitoring. So take, for example, car insurance. We typically see car insurance as, so you have, a credit score, or like a car credit score. When the surveillance company says this is your rate, they're taking into account very high level points of data. But what if instead they could literally monitor you as you drive and then make your rate in accordance to how you're driving? So this is like this is a perfect example, is like the Drive Safe and Save. And I think like other insurance companies have it too, but Drive Safe and Save is the one I know the name of. It literally is surveillance capitalism. It's monitoring you as you drive and then making a rate based off that.
What are you going to do, though, for the products that won't be able to exist if we were to get rid of, like, surveillance capitalism? Like, let's say, like, Facebook or Gmail or YouTube, like, these things become unsustainable or don't exist anymore because they don't make any revenue from advertising anymore.
I mean, what do you do with a business that relies on child labor? If it's not viable without violating people's rights, I don't see why that...
Well, don't people kind of give up those rights when they agree to use those services? Like, people always say they want more data privacy, but then they're on Facebook all the time, like, voluntarily submitting their data anyway. Like, do you really think people would be okay?
They're on Facebook all the time because they don't have a choice. Facebook has 2.3 billion users. If you want to participate in things like, let's say, the electoral process, if you want to voice your political opinions, you have to use things like Facebook.
Yeah, so, like, you're talking about... Are you going
to walk down the street and go down to the park like it's 1980?
Well, you're essentially talking about, like, the deletion of these platforms, right? Do you think people would be okay
No, absolutely not. No. Surveillance capitalism is new. Surveillance capitalism, I mean, it is very much a new concept. What we've transitioned to over the past 10 years is we've gone from the information age to the algorithm age. Instead of just having all of these aspects of our lives computerized, we're actually now at the point where we're processing it in ways that are in violation of rights and harmful to people.
Well, so we say violation of rights. I
Yes.
mean, we could talk specifically about what that means, because it's not like a constitutional right has been violated or something. But I'm just like, I mean, when you say that this existed only like within the past 10 years, I mean, a lot of things have become more sophisticated as of the past 10 years. But like, we've also gotten a lot of products and services as a result of said levels of sophistication, right? Like we have like online live streaming platforms for video. We've got, videos on demand hosted on like YouTube. Like, we've gotten a lot of these services arguably because they've been able to monetize using data algorithms. If we were to toss all of that,
that's not true.
You think that all of these services would exist at the same level without the type of advertising models that they have today? Where would they get the money from?
Well, they get the money. They can have the money from advertising. It's the individualized advertising.
Well, yeah,
it's the idea that
the revenues,
if I watch
the revenues
the Super Bowl,
but the revenues would be severely curbed if you got rid of the ability to advertise in the way that we do. Right? You must. I don't know what kind of software engineering you do.
I disagree with that. I don't think that that's true.
Again,
like I said, I don't think
we have to settle that, because that's like empirically. I would bet I would stake my life on that right now. I know that to be true, right? The whole reason why you engage in these forms of like algorithmic learning is because it gives you the ability to know more about your customer and target individual ads in a more effective manner.
I understand what you're saying. My counter to it is, if I understand that where Facebook and YouTube get their revenue from is from advertising. That makes sense to me.
Sure.
That obviously is true. But the level to which they advertise and the means that they use to advertise they violate people's privacy.
Well, so like what specific means, I guess, are not good here? So like, let's say, for instance, like I visit let's say I visit 3 Facebook pages on firearms, and then Facebook notices that like they have like a profile built around my session where it's like this person likes firearms. Should they be able to serve me, advertisements for guns, or do you think that's an illegal algorithm that violates my rights?
No, they can certainly do your interests. They can certainly have your interests pinpointed.
Okay, so then let's say that I do guns and I also have a grandmother. Let's say that I've been Googling like insulin or whatever. Like, do they have the right to like build a profile? Like, because that's essentially what this advertising is. It's building profiles around like customers and then trying to serve them ads that fit like a specific criteria, right? That's basically what we're talking about.
Yes. I think obviously you can have advertisements based around individualized interests. The thing that's threatening is when you have what we call it, an economic model that is based around constant surveillance. If you go
what
to
do you
a
mean when you
gun
say
page on
surveillance?
Facebook,
Uh-huh.
that is different than Facebook tracking your car through Bluetooth.
Well, but in
Does
order
that
to
make
track
sense?
your car through Bluetooth, you would have to like agree for them to do it.
No. Facebook has patents out there today, and this isn't just Facebook. This is Amazon too. Amazon has it with Wi-Fi. Facebook has a patent out there today that they will set up Bluetooth what would you call it? Bluetooth receivers, things that you can connect to with Bluetooth.
Yeah, but you would have to
And as
plug
you
your,
drive
you would have
through
to plug that into your car.
No. Okay,
You
if I
you have to have something into either the OBD2 port, or you have to have some interface with your stereo. Yes, you can't unless you're talking about just like tracking GPS
you're not
movements.
connecting to it. It sees your device as available. It sees your phone in your car as available, and as it leaves the range of that Bluetooth, it gets onto the range of the next one, and it's tracking your car. This is an actual patent that Facebook has.
Okay, so can you explain to me exactly how this works? What do you?
Okay, so let's say you're going from point A to point B.
Okay.
And along point A and point B are three things that can see that could be connected to by Bluetooth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 1, 2, and 3. As you move from point A, your phone will be visible on Bluetooth device 1, and then you'll move out of the range of Bluetooth device 1 into the range of Bluetooth device 2, and then you leave Bluetooth device 2, and it gets into the range of Bluetooth device 3.
Oh, so using like
Okay?
a network of like Bluetooth enabled devices to kind of serial
Precisely.
over whatever.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So
This-
not something
these are the
okay,
threats
gotcha.
of surveillance capitalism. Not what pages you go to.
So, sure. I would say that seems like kind of a shady thing to do.
And then again, that's not just Facebook. That Amazon has the same thing too with it's like this radio Wi-Fi. I forget the exact name of it, but it's like this long-range Wi-Fi that they want to set up all over the city, or all over cities, not the city, in order to track people as they move. So even with this, you don't even need something like you wouldn't even need something like GPS turned on or location services turned on your phone. These companies are still able to track you. This is the kind of constant surveillance that we're talking about, and we're also talking about contracts where you would, quote unquote, agree.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I understand. So what would be like a proposed solution to stuff like that?
You would just ban that kind of surveillance. You would ban any kind of like data point tracking of people who are non-consenting.
Yeah, that sounds like a reasonable thing to do. I would argue that things in the European Union, like I think the GDPR probably made decent steps towards like informing people like what kind of data is available about them and giving them the right to have it deleted. I think it's like a right to be forgotten law or whatever, where they delete your data if they haven't accessed it in a year, or they have to notify you or something. I think that those types of laws are okay. Sure.
Yeah, the GDPR is really good in terms of data management, and a lot of the things that are banned in the GDPR are actually being abused to this day in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that's really important in the GDPR is you can't have individualized personal like data, like address, name, social security. You can't have that in the same data sets as things like clicks. So my name is Brian. My address is blah blah blah, United States. That information cannot be stored in the same place that says I went to 3 Facebook gun pages.
Okay.
That was just a side note about the GDPR is really good about another thing about the GDPR. I'll just say this because I have I just know in terms of security, because obviously in the new age of cyber threats, our security is greatly at risk as well.
Yeah.
They have things that if the data gets compromised, sorry, it's getting me a long time to get to this.
Yeah,
if the data gets compromised, they have to notify the EU within like 72 hours. And this is like completely different than like when we take a look at how Experian like lost our data, or was it Expedia?
I think it was Experian or Equifax, maybe. Sorry.
Equifax. Oh, thank you. When Equifax like lost our data, they took months to report it to anybody, and at least 2 of their executives have been caught, violating the SAC because they sold stock after they figured out it had happened.
Mm-hmm.
That was like completely not allowed within the GDPR. So yeah, there's certainly things about the GDPR that I definitely like.
Sure.
Another thing that are we good on the economy?
Yeah, I mean those specific things. I think that like most things that relate to like tracking like your movements and stuff, those should almost certainly be opt-in instead of just automatically being done via devices without like making it clear that it's being done. I would agree with that for sure.
Yeah, and another thing that my book advocates for is more frequent opting in.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of like the uncertainty about like, does Facebook listen to my phone? This comes from the fact that you give Facebook one-time permanent access, or not permanent, you can revoke it, but one time, not perpetually confirmed, or not perpetually prompted.
You don't
to
reaffirm.
confirm.
Yeah, I really like how iPhones do this. It was interesting. I got an iPhone recently, and I noticed that every now and then it'll ask you, it'll say like, hey, this app has accessed your location, X amount of times. Do you still want it to be running while you're not having it open or whatever? Yeah, I understand what you mean. Yeah, I don't think Android asks that stuff at all.
So here's an interesting thing. On Android, there's 250 applications that have access to microphone for the sole purpose of knowing your location. And what they do is they put these high frequency beams that like are in like a human ear can't hear them. They put them in McDonald's. I think McDonald's is one of them. They put it in the McDonald's, and then your phone, as your phone gets close to it, your phone's microphone picks up the signal and transmits, "Hey, I'm close to McDonald's right now."
Wait, is that actually true?
That is actually that's true.
Huh.
So that there's 250 Android applications that currently have that ability, and there's also not 250. That's the other number. 1,200 applications that have permanent real-time GPS location monitoring, and some of them don't even use it. Like, so the Weather Channel had an application that obviously it needs to know your location because it's the Weather Channel. I don't care about the weather in
I'm sorry, wait,
England.
hold on. Wait, I'm just super curious of this. I'm trying to find this.
Okay.
So I thought that most microphones only pick up like a certain frequency, like within like isn't the low end like 60 hertz up to like 20 kilohertz or like 15 kilohertz? Are they really I'm just curious. I'm just trying to look up because I haven't heard of some of these things before.
Here, I just did a Google search. I'll send it to you on Discord.
For marketing beacons, hold on.
I don't know if this is a good article. I just did a quick Google search. It was the second result.
Yeah, hold on. I'm just curious. Interesting. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
So I was talking about the Weather Channel. Mm-hmm. So the Weather Channel obviously has to know your location in order to give you accurate weather results. But what they ask for is different than what they need. So they ask for, or what they use. They ask for your location. You say, okay, yeah, I'll give you my location because you need to give me weather results. The Weather Channel actually just tracked everything and saved it, like the user's movements across the town, the user's precise location data, and they sold it. They just sold it. Hey, we have all this data on all these users. Who's buying? Mm-hmm. This was actually reported in an LA Times investigation. So I think we need to be not only more specific in when we give opt-in consent, but also what exactly we're giving opt-in consent to. A lot of people who have the Weather Channel application on their phone probably don't know that my location is being sold as a result of giving the Weather Channel application that kind of access. But also the full need to use that for the Weather Channel's directed weather information, I guess you could say. And another example of this is the Target application actually changed prices whether or not you're in the store. You'd think, oh, the Target application, it needs my location because it needs to find the closest store to me. Mm-hmm. Well, that's true. But then as soon as you walk, like it'll advertise prices to you if you look it up on the Target app, and then as soon as you walk in the store, it'll change the prices to be what the stores are. So in this case, you could be, oh, I'm going to get a $10 bottle of milk, and then you walk in and it's 12.
Does that actually happen?
Yeah, that's real.
Gotcha. Okay.
Let's see. Do you trust Business Insider? Here you go.
Target app price is different in stores. Gotcha. Interesting. Okay. It's pretty scummy. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the whole thing is really scummy. And another thing, we need to look not just at location data in terms of GPS. Like I said before, I guess this is something we already talked about, but like, it's not just enough to say GPS needs to be better monitored, because we just named 3 other ways that they can track your location via triangulation and like networking that have nothing to do with GPS. So
sure.
So another thing that we're going to lose, or that is a threat with automation, is the loss of, I would call this the loss of freedom. The loss of freedom of speech, the loss of freedom of expression. When online platforms ban people, it really is a violation of these rights. So when Facebook says you're no longer allowed to comment, your account's been terminated, I consider that to be a freedom of speech violation.
And don't you think it's kind of like a shady area to be like forcing companies to host content that they don't necessarily want to host? Isn't that kind of a weird area to get in?
Absolutely not. It is weird. I admit that it's weird, but I think that there's absolutely a clear answer. Let me say that. If you look up, there's actually a Supreme Court precedent. If you look up 1945 Marsh versus Alabama, what happened here was there was a girl. She was a Jehovah's Witness, and this is in the town of Chickasaw, Alabama, which was in the 1940s. The entire town's infrastructure was owned by this company that was a shipbuilding company that had sold ships during World War II and then into the Cold War. So the company's business had exploded, and as a result, they had been required to build things like streets, post offices, that like things that would typically be built by the city government, because the town itself had exploded so hard, so much. The town itself was, or the company that needed to bring people there was required to build these things. So as a result, they owned it. So this woman, Grace Marsh, she's a Jehovah's Witness, and she worked for the company. And she, outside of the post office on a sidewalk, was distributing religious text about being a Jehovah's Witness. Total freedom of speech, freedom of expression issue, you could say. Because the town owned the property, they told her, you need to leave. You can't do this. We don't like it. We don't like your religion. We don't like you spreading this. This is our property. Get off it. That case actually went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court decided that it was within Grace Marsh's rights to exercise her freedom of speech and expression and religion, because there was no public option for her to go around and say, there was no public sidewalk to say, just, get off my property and go to the public spot. So in that case, she actually won that case and was allowed to do that. I think the same thing applies. There's actually a quote from the, I don't know, what would you call it? The defense, the prosecutor. I don't know what the winning side of the Supreme Court case, the side of Grace Marsh.
Okay.
There was actually a quote that says, when property rights intersect with individual rights should win. And I absolutely agree with that deciding thing when it comes to whether or not companies like Facebook and Google, through things like YouTube, which is the second biggest social media, the second and first biggest social media, they should absolutely be forced, you could say, to give people a platform, because there is no way to reach the same people without using those platforms. Take in account the town of Chickasaw, Alabama, had 5,000 residents, within the city when this was decided. So the Supreme Court thought that it was absolutely necessary to preserve Grace Marsh's right to broadcast her opinion to 5,000 people. There's 2.3 billion monthly users on Facebook, 2 billion on YouTube. The numbers are, I don't even know what percent that would be.
It feels like for that online talk, though, it feels like there would be more you can make the argument that there are other platforms that you could use, whereas for the lady in that city, if that would have been like the only place where she could have advertised from, wouldn't they have a stronger argument there?
I would disagree. So there have been dissenting cases to the 1945 Grace Marsh versus Alabama case. For example, there was a 1970s case, I think, where people wanted to pass out anti-war pamphlets because I was in the middle of the Vietnam War. There was the mall that they were in a mall. Sorry, I have to remember this stuff. They were in a mall and they were handing out these anti-war pamphlets, and the mall said you need to get out of here. That case went to the Supreme Court as well, and the Supreme Court in that case decided that they didn't have a right because they could just use the sidewalk. I would argue that it's not about whether or not the platform exists; it's about the access to people. When it comes to the freedom of assembly, let's take Reddit, for example. When it comes to the freedom of assembly, Reddit literally sorts everything by topic. So if you want to talk about technology, you go to the technology subreddit. If you want to talk about, you know how Reddit works.
Yeah.
When you ban certain topics, you're banning the possibility of assembly under those topics is essentially what you're doing. When you ban people, you're basically saying you don't have access to reach these people anymore. So, like I said, I think it's more about the access to people than it is about the access to the platform. If there is another platform that you could use to reach the people of YouTube, then sure, but YouTube's the only place where that can happen.
Wait, so does this mean that basically every single platform would be disallowed from ever banning any person from using said platform?
I would agree with that. Yeah. Because what are you losing? You're losing 1 billion out of 1 person out of 2 billion. Obviously, this person's rights to their freedom of speech is way more important than your rights to your server property.
That.
Now, just to be clear, I am not in any way defending illegal speech. If you say something which is impermissibly illegal, if you post child.
No, I'm not talking about illegal stuff. I'm just saying that it seems
I know.
strange.
I'm saying if your speech falls into the realm of free speech, it absolutely should be allowed to be platformed.
So if I ever wanted to make a forum that only had a certain political group there, I would be disallowed from doing that, basically.
No. I don't see a problem with banning people from okay, if you go to the technology subreddit and you obviously break their rules or whatever, I don't see a problem with that, with you getting banned from that subreddit. I would see a problem with you getting banned off the platform. If you want to go make technology too or whatever, and if you want to, if you still freely want to communicate with the users of the platform, that's fine. But I don't see a problem with blocking people or keeping them off specific things.
Okay.
Another thing that we'll lose in terms of freedom, because I'm talking about the freedom of speech and expression and assembly. And this is a quote. I just have it written down here from the surveillance capitalism thing. So the person who talks the most about surveillance capitalism is a professor named Shoshana Zuboff, and she just has a quote here about the loss of freedom that says, and this just goes back to surveillance capitalism. She says, "The freedom from uncertainty is no freedom." So I think that was a good quote. I just wanted to share that.
The freedom from uncertainty is no freedom.
So the freedom from market uncertainty and the freedom from it's once you boil everything down to a deterministic state in terms of the market, then people aren't really making free market choices is basically what she's expressing there.
Gotcha. Okay.
Another thing about the loss of freedom is obviously our loss of privacy rights. I don't know if that would be like the loss of freedom, more as like the loss of like our values, you might say. Like we obviously value privacy a lot more, but we do have things like enshrined in our Constitution. We have things like privacy rights. The difference here, like the difference from the freedom of expression, is that it's not the government violating them; it's businesses violating them. And I think that we just need a wholesale like return to like understanding that in this new age of like transnational companies that have this immense power, you know, billions of people on their user bases, that we're not really talking about. We're talking about the same scale as what the government might have been able to do in the 1780s in terms of banning people and using their power to violate rights and whatnot.
And how? In what ways? What do you mean by that?
So like the loss of privacy rights, like the reason we have the Fourth Amendment is because like of the tyranny of the British soldiers and Britain in the colonies. So we have like, you have to have a good reason to come into my property. You have to have a good reason to search my stuff. Like you have to have. That's because we were under the government itself was the one violating these rights. That's not really the case right now. There are people violating our rights, but it's not the government. It's these private companies. And I just think that we need to, in the same way with the freedom of speech, we just need to make a countrywide decision, or realization, I should say, that the loss of the privacy rights and the freedom of speech to the government is just as bad, or maybe only marginally worse than the loss of those rights due to corporations.
Okay, because corporations control so much infrastructure, whatever that we communicate on and everything.
Yes, and just to clarify, when we talk about the freedom of speech online, it doesn't have to be without concessions. If Facebook is forced to platform people, then obviously we should like strengthen the decision that Facebook is also absolved of like responsibility for what they say. So when you see people like this is enshrined in Section 230 of the 1996 Communications Decency Act. It basically says if you're an online platform, you're not responsible for the things people say on your platform. Like you can't be legally held responsible if I say something like, you know, I'm gonna shoot a congressman or something like on Facebook. Facebook is not going to be responsible for that. Now, I should certainly be held responsible for that, but not Facebook. That is already part of U.S. law. So we need to just strengthen the understanding that when people say things online, they're not.
The platform that it's happening on isn't like.
Yeah. Like if we're gonna make them host these what most people would call like unlikable or unbecoming things, then we need to strengthen that. So when you see people like Joe Biden say we need to get rid of Section 230, like in my mind, I'd like take a shock and I say, well, wait a second, that if that's like completely the wrong direction. So
sure.
Do you want to keep going?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, what else?
Okay. So next thing that I think is at risk here is our culture. So when we talk about things like national cohesion, let me get the stat here. Man, where is it? Sorry. I had all these written down.
You said national cohesion?
Yeah, I just want to. It's like something. It's like 77% of Americans currently think that like the country is super divided, yeah, 77. Sorry, 77% of the country thinks of the country as divided. So there's obviously we're losing some cohesion here, and I don't think this is all the fault of technology. It's mostly the fault of like I might call it like the ability to tolerate things, the loss of community, like loss of shared experiences. Like back in the day, we used to have like this is before I was alive, but we used to have like 4 television channels. So when you watch something like MASH, that you were sharing that experience with millions upon millions of Americans. Now, I mean, I think you might watch the NFL and that might have like 15 million viewers. I don't know, like that's about like the top as it gets. So I just think that we're obviously losing our shared experiences. We're having these completely separate like understandings of what it or experiences of like what it means to be an American. So your experience of an American might be you go online, you go to Facebook, you only see your view, you only see your political viewpoint expressed. You don't ever really see the other side. You purposefully don't interact with the other side. Like Facebook and YouTube have this huge problem where they just like funnel you into a filter bubble.
Yeah, because they're just trying to get you to watch the most amount of hours they can of content possible, which requires showing you stuff that you already want to see.
Precisely. So, and I think that like, I think that that's dangerous. I think that there's a lot that we lose when we do that too. Like how many times, when was that like border wall discussion happening? Like 2 years ago, where like the government shut down because Trump wanted to do the shit with the border with the funding.
Oh yeah, I think that was like 7 months ago or something.
Wow, it's only 7. Damn. Anyway, I don't agree. I don't want a border wall, but I can at least like say when Trump talks about a border wall, he's not like saying racism. He's saying like there's human trafficking going on. There's this, there's that, there's blah blah blah. So like, like you can't even express that. You can't even like say Trump doesn't want a border wall necessarily because he hates Mexicans. That's not the only reason. He has these legitimate viewpoints that like obviously we want to end human trafficking, right? And this is leading to human trafficking. So, but you can't even express that without being like, oh, you're a freaking Nazi. I'm not a Nazi. I don't want a border wall. I'm just saying this is his viewpoint. You know what I mean? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So yeah, I thought totally that's just one example. I mean, there's obviously a lot of examples where we're just not tolerating viewpoints. Another thing that we're losing in terms of our culture and shared experiences is like our local communities. It used to be that things were really, really, really more. I use the word local, but localized. So we used to be super super entwined in like our local governments and our local businesses and everything. Like if you lived in a town, you knew which businesses were in the town. You knew who was like the employer. So like if things like crappy labor disputes happened, like you knew the company, you knew the people who were at the heads of the company, and you knew like how to take action against that and be like, hey, you need to stop treating your workers like this. But when we take a look at a company like take Instacart, for example, which is a company that it's a gig economy company. It's based in Silicon Valley in Palo Alto, and it treats its workers like garbage. It's like constantly cutting their wages and everything, but people have no recourse there. People like you. Who are you blaming? You're just mad at some company in California. You're not. The politics is really divided from. The politics is really divided from the community that you're in.
Yeah.
Why does Instacart care about the happiness of the people in Wichita, Kansas, when they're it's just there's not a whole lot of back and forth. I feel like I'm just talking at you. Do you have any like pushback or anything?
Well, no. I mean, I don't think I disagree with anything you've said. I mean, I think I agree with most of the points. I mean, like, yeah, I don't know what to say. I don't think I disagree. What is there something that you would have expected me to disagree with? I guess.
Well, I don't know. Do you have anything? I don't know. I don't know all your viewpoints.
I think like most of what you say like aligns with like a pretty decent reading of like how the world exists in the United States today. Like, I don't disagree with anything. I mean, society's become more fractionalized from everything. People feel like they don't have voices in local politics. Some tech companies are definitely overreaching when it comes to the amount of surveillance they do with our data. I don't know how I feel exactly on the compelling all platforms to host every type of speech. That seems like it would get a little bit weird to regulate, and it seems like
not all types of speech. Just like, okay, what's like a classic thing that like a tech platform would have like a rule against? It'd be something like hate speech, right?
Sure, yeah.
I just don't agree with. I don't think that hate speech is like, maybe this is something that we can like dive into. I don't think that hate speech certainly exists. I just don't think that it needs to be banned.
Yeah, sure, but it's just like, I guess, who are you to tell a company that, I guess?
What do you mean, who am I? I'm on...
I don't mean like you particularly, but I mean like for the government to come in and basically say like, you're not allowed to have like these rules in your platform for like saying no hate speech. Like that's federally banned. You can't do that. Like that just seems like a pretty big overreach in terms of like First Amendment rights. Like the government...
No, I would say the opposite. I would say it's an overreach of an abuse of First Amendment rights to ban people. I mean, if we're talking about things like, you know, being disenfranchised by like local governments, how does it feel to be censored by someone, you know, sitting in the anti-hate speech room in Facebook headquarters?
Well, I mean, like, if you wanted to get around this, wouldn't we essentially have to make these like, wouldn't we have to like nationalize the company basically, like, and make it like a
No.
wouldn't that get around it? Like, if you make it a public utility, I think I'd be less concerned, but I don't know. It just seems
if you made a public utility, then it would be if you had a place that was publicly owned for America, then you would totally get around this. I agree. If you had a place where Americans could go to express their right to free speech, and then yes, then the private interests could align. Then you could say, well, the Facebook wants this, the people want this. Here is the government provided public utility. But I don't want to make everything a public utility. That I'm a capitalist, okay? Like that doesn't make sense to me to say that Facebook should be made into a public utility. That
yeah, but like let's say Facebook was like they built their infrastructure, they have their rules, they did everything, they've got their company, and let's say that for whatever reason, because of the vision of the company, like we don't really want this type of speech on our platform. We're just not comfortable with it. We don't like it. But you would be okay saying like, well, no, doesn't matter what you want. Like your business is compelled to host this type of content, even if you don't want to. So now maybe
in the same way that the shipbuilding company in Chickasaw, Alabama was told we don't like this speech, but the rights of the person wishing to express them trumped that.
Well, but that was kind of different because that was like, it seemed like a company was literally like owning parts of a city, right? Like, and this is like about like a public sidewalk.
How is this? Okay, but Facebook owns a huge part of the internet. And if you want to talk about like internet ownership, I mean, Google is a huge monopoly in terms of the internet. Google owns, let me think, 80% of desktop browsers. I saw you were using a Google Chrome browser. I'm using a Google Chrome browser. They have a 92% monopoly on searches. They have the second biggest social media in the US. Like, in terms of if a company disagrees and wants you off, that's a huge price to pay. There's no rules against things like Google Chrome suddenly saying we're no longer gonna display this person's YouTube page. Like, if YouTube's a bad example because YouTube is also owned by Google. Like, if Google Chrome said twitter.com/Brian Wolatz is no longer a valid URL, we're not going to display it, that they're totally within their right to do so. I think that is.
Is there any precedent for people doing that though? The only thing I can think of is like DNSs will do that sometimes, where they'll say we don't want to host, or no, not a DNS. I'm sorry, some server providers will do that. They'll say we're not going to host certain websites or whatever. You think they should be compelled to host those sites as well then?
I think that this comes around to like the arguments like for net neutrality, where the company itself, because of their stake in the infrastructure of the internet, they should be compelled to be fair. They should be compelled to host things that don't have or that might be unbecoming, or that might look bad for advertisers. And this absolutely, I don't know if Google has done this, but if you take a look at a company like Cloudflare, okay? Cloudflare took what Gabby. Is that the name? Gabby? Gab.ai?
Yeah.
Did you say that Gabby? Like
Gab.
Cloudflare took Gabby offline after like the Pittsburgh shooter.
Mm-hmm.
I don't agree with anything on Gabby, but like that is clearly Gabby is not a DNS site. Like that's not what their purpose is. If you want to have that infrastructure and you want to be like a sole provider of that, then you have to be fair, in my opinion. It's the same argument as net neutrality. The expectation to use the internet isn't that you have to build these huge apparatuses. You shouldn't be the one who has to go in to 3 billion computers and plug in the Ethernet port. Like there's obviously infrastructure that exists and people have a right to use it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. Fuck, I'd have to think about that because there's a lot of far-reaching effects to that one. I'm not 100% sure.
Do you agree with net neutrality?
With net neutrality, I do, yeah, because like there's like you have like literal monopolies that exist there for good reason.
There is more of a monopoly on something like a Google search than there is in internet service providers.
Well, not really, because in some places, like I literally have no alternatives for internet. But I mean, I can use DuckDuckGo, or I'm sure Yahoo Search or Bing still exists. Like,
in some cases, okay, when you take a company like Cloudflare, okay, Cloudflare has an intellectual property that manages things like DDoS protection. Okay, they're like the only company that provides it. And companies build their infrastructure around being able to use Cloudflare. And then Cloudflare can just cut them off at any point in time. Even if they're like a paying customer, just because they don't agree with the politics of the site.
There's got to be other services that are similar to Cloudflare.
I'm not saying that Cloudflare is, in my opinion, Cloudflare is the best, it's the most used, it's the most utilized. So
I guess the only reason why I'm saying it is because like having like other services is a pretty important part of the argument. Like for ISPs, the reason why I'm a big like in favor of net neutrality is because you can't duplicate the infrastructure for internet. So if one ISP exists, like that's literally it. Like it's literally impossible. You can't just go anywhere and get it. You'd have to move. But for like internet stuff, like usually there are like competing services or similar things that offer like whatever you'd be losing if you got banned or excluded from one platform or another. And then we're still presupposing that.
Sorry, go ahead.
That like
what's the point of a mask if it's always slipping off Pepe?
Fuck, I would have to think about this so much. You're basically saying that you can't have a terms of service on these sites. It's like that you'd make that illegal. There's no such thing as a TOS. Like, would you ban people for harassing other users, or that's not bannable either, huh?
No. No. You wouldn't ban people from harassing people,
Anyone
but you
taking
would
AMC tomorrow.
give people more options to do things like block. Like, I have no problem with like.
Yeah, but what about a guy that makes like 50 accounts then and just keeps doing it over and over and over again?
Well, then obviously you have the ability to ban like botted accounts and unverified accounts.
Okay, so let's say that I made like a group, and our goal was to find users on the site to harass them, and then we like coordinated that harassment or whatever. You wouldn't be allowed to ban this group. You'd be in favor of keeping that group.
You do know that cyberstalking is illegal, right?
I don't think that's true.
That is true. It's part of the 2006 Violence Against Women Act.
What is cyber stalking?
I do not know the exact legal definition.
I know that right now I can go and look up a bunch of information about somebody, and I can probably harass them over and over again. I don't think they can't do anything legally to me about it. They might be able to get a protection order against me, or a restraining order against me, and then if I violate that, and then if I go to the particular state, I might be able to get in trouble. But like, I don't know.
Cyber stalking is more. Now I agree that cyber stalking. Here's what I'm trying to say. I don't agree with cyberstalking. I don't think that cyberstalking should be allowed. Cyberstalking is not allowed. That's not a claim to the effectiveness of cyberstalking legislation. Do you understand that?
Okay. So then you'd say that like if those groups existed, just to say like, hey, like we're gonna go spam these people over and over again, you would be in favor of at least banning those groups.
Certainly, yes.
But the behavior itself, you wouldn't ban.
If the behavior itself falls in line with cyberstalking laws. And exactly what cyberstalking is.
No. Okay, so like,
I think I see what you're saying.
Yeah, let's say that you've got like,
I don't agree with cyberstalking, but I can't define exactly what it is. Is that what you're saying?
No. I'm just curious, like, because you're essentially saying that it would be that companies shouldn't ban anybody for anything ever. So like,
Oh, that's not true.
short of
No,
like breaking the law, obviously. Short of breaking the law,
yes.
obviously. So like, let's say that I have I make some accounts or whatever, and all I do is every single time I see somebody on Twitter, I just like call them the N-word, and that's all that account is for. Like you would say like, well, the company can't ban that account. That's a violation of their free speech.
You could walk down the street and every person you saw say the N-word to. How is this different? It makes you a piece of
Well, because the
garbage.
street is publicly owned property that we all pay tax money for, that we all have a right to share the space.
But we've
with.
already determined that with the only way to reach users is on these online platforms.
Yeah, but we're
then
not talking about
rights
the only way
should
to reach
exist the
users.
same.
We're talking about where the funding comes from. And for Facebook, like that funding
Wait, what about funding? Sorry, say that
well,
one
for
more time.
Facebook, the funding is private. It's a privately funded company. Whereas for like sidewalks, well, that's publicly funded, right? So it plays by a different set of rules, right?
Yes, but if there is no public option, then Facebook should be allowed.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess I don't know if I'm comfortable
Or
with that.
Facebook
that,
should
like,
be,
the idea
should
that
be
we
not
basically-
allowed to ban people. Sorry,
yeah.
I said that wrong.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm okay with that. Like basically, you lose the ability to ban anybody from your platform for any reason short of like anything that's breaking the law.
What is the claim in your that you frame it that way, and I understand that framing. But what my counter to that is that what is your legal ability to remove the right of speech from those people? The same way that the town wanted to
because they're
remove
not-
the right of speech from Grace Marsh.
Well, I don't think the town thing is comparable. I'm pretty sure there have been other cases that have ruled differently, and that I've got a guy that keeps spamming about this. But like the town thing, I think the big part of that was that part of that like municipality was literally owned by a corporation. It wasn't just like an internet thing. Like there was literally like part of a city that was
The
owned by
internet
a
wasn't
company.
around yet then.
Sure,
correct.
yeah. So,
I
like, this
don't-
would be like
It's the same level of access. It's actually hugely more level of access. The only way for that person to reach those people was to be on that sidewalk in front of the post office using that infrastructure. The same way that today, reaching those people requires the use of Facebook's infrastructure, of Comcast's infrastructure, of Cloudflare's infrastructure, of et cetera, of all the internet service providers companies.
Fuck. Wait here, hold on, real quick. Can I bring in a dude to chat about this real quick? Because he's getting really mad at me. Do you want to talk to another guy about this real quick? I'm curious what the actual arguments are behind this. Is that okay?
I'm sorry.
Can I bring in another guy who wants to chat about this real quick? He just wants to talk to you for like a couple seconds, I think.
Okay, sure.
Hold on 1 second. Oh wait, we're not friends on Discord. I sent you a friend request. Sorry.
Okay.
Oh wait, I'm sorry. Okay, hold on. I'm here. Go. Sorry.
So the reason why Arch Holding, essentially established the First Amendment right is because the town, which was entirely privately owned,
Correct.
became a quasi-municipality because every single aspect of the town was privately owned, but everything in there essentially mirrored the functionality of a public city. So, the streets were, it had essentially its own municipal government. It had its own, internal like postage service. There was a private police force. There were private streets that were maintained by private employees. And the Supreme Court essentially said, because you are entirely operating as if you were a public municipality, then First Amendment rights apply there. Now,
Sure.
that's a tremendous distinction from something like the Lloyd case, in which, they said, hey, when you're on a public property, when you're on a private property, and you have other options in which you can exercise your First Amendment rights, then you don't get a blanket carte blanche, justification to impose your views on private property. Now, you can say Facebook owns a large, they occupy a large percentage of, internet speech, but they don't own all of it. It's absolutely absurd to say that a town that's entirely privately owned that you live in could be analogized to Facebook, which has a large market share, but it does not have a global monopoly on the right to express yourself over the internet.
Okay. I understand what you're saying, but the way that people today are expressing themselves, expressing their political opinions, protesting things, expressing their religious opinion, like, all the aspects of the First Amendment rights today are taking place online, and it's not protected, and that's a problem.
But I mean, so your proposal is to regulate every aspect of the internet. So you want First Amendment rights to be applied from from the manufacturer of my keyboard to the manufacturer of my mouse to whoever makes my monitor to whoever assembles my computer to you want every single level of abstraction to apply to my First Amendment rights just because it's an instrumentality from which I derive speech.
Yes, I don't think if you type NI that your keyboard should stop typing if you start typing more the N word because that's hate speech. I don't agree with that at all.
Okay.
How is that not a direct violation of your First Amendment rights?
Because the First Amendment applies to interactions between an individual, a private individual, and the government.
The way that people are expressing their First Amendment rights today is via these private platforms. There is no equivalent in the government. There is no public internet. There is no.
Yeah, you walk outside to your sidewalk and you protest the war. You protest against the border wall. You protest against whatever cause. You advocate for Jesus Christ on the corner or whatever.
Yes. And how do you get people to protest with you? You make a Facebook group.
What?
If you're staging a protest, if you're staging assembly, if you're trying to use the collective voice of people, you use the internet to coordinate this. You use your voice on the internet to protest. You use all these things.
Yes, and I just don't understand how you apply that to private companies. I mean, you still have the same exact way that it was applied in the 1945 case. You say that you have no right to erase this person's voice. You have no right to do this. If you're denied the right to talk on Facebook, your voice is not erased. You preserve your right to speak. You just speak somewhere else. The First Amendment doesn't protect the volume of your voice, the level, how loud you speak. If you have the ability to speak and to be heard, you're protected under it. Just because you're denied access to the largest private platform doesn't mean your First Amendment rights have magically disappeared.
I would disagree with that. I think that if you lose...
But that's wrong. You're wrong. That's what the holding of the case said.
Okay, look. I'm a software engineer. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know
I am a lawyer. Just to interrupt you, I am a lawyer. So just take that into account.
Then level with me for a little bit here, okay? I'm not saying that the First Amendment necessarily protects this. It's obviously not the case. That the First Amendment currently exists in a state where Facebook can't ban people. That's obviously not what I'm saying. I'm saying what should be. What rights are people losing, and should those be protected? I'm using an example of a Supreme Court case in which the Supreme Court decided that the private interests, the private corporations, were silencing this person's political and religious speech from being heard.
Yes.
That is a replicable model for how we should approach.
Okay. So if Facebook had a 100% monopoly over all instrumentalities on the internet, I would agree with you. But they don't. Like, I could still, if I get banned from Facebook, I could go somewhere else. I could go to some random message board somewhere, some BBS forum. I could go to, Usenet, for God's sakes. And guess what? My voice is still getting out there, so I'm still being heard. I'm not being denied the right to speak.
That's not true. No, you could absolutely be banned from every single online platform. Do you know who Alex Jones is?
Yeah.
Okay, Alex Jones, in a matter of 12 hours, was banned from 4 online platforms.
Yeah, guess what? You could still watch his videos on the internet.
Wait, so I'm curious. If you walk into a restaurant, and when you go to a restaurant, you just like to scream the N-word, and you hate Jews like all the time, like, are you saying the restaurant shouldn't be allowed to ban you from there either?
No, the restaurant can absolutely ban you from there. But if the restaurant bans you from there, you can go to the sidewalk and say the same thing.
Well, what if all restaurants start banning you in a city, though?
Alex Jones is not using a public sidewalk. He's using his own private platform. The expectation is if I don't agree with Alex Jones. Fuck Alex Jones, okay? But what I'm saying is the expectation for me to have my political voice be heard, and for everybody to have their political voice be heard, is not to create your own website with your own user base, with your own everything. That clearly cannot be a sustainable model for political voices in the future.
Why? You're still getting your voice is still being heard. You're not being denied the right to speech.
I'm not saying you have the right to be heard by everybody. I'm saying you have a right to push your political opinions and express yourself, the freedom of expression, onto people of the platform.
Yeah. I mean, you have it. You build your own platform. You don't have a right to the largest platform. You can't argue fundamentally that just because you're not allowed on the largest platform, that your speech rights are somehow being violated. Like, that just doesn't make sense.
How else are you supposed to reach those people? How else are you supposed to organize? How else are you supposed in the modern age of the internet, when we're spending a third of our day on sitting in front of computers? How are you supposed to reach those people and engage them politically if you're banned from the platform?
This sounds like a marketing problem, not more than anything. If you have an issue getting your voice out there, if you have an issue with people consuming your content, then hey man, that's your problem. Maybe you talk to a PR agency, maybe you talk to a marketing company, but your rights are not fundamentally being violated here. Okay?
So is your position, honestly, if I'm a politically, very non-political person, I don't post about politics all that often, I maybe engage in the month of November to align myself with what each party's talking about, and then I go and vote. You're saying that my political speech, I should have to contact a PR agency in order to express it?
Well, you're not talking about just being able to express your speech. You're talking about having a right to access somebody else's platform, right?
Yes, you are. You are talking about the right. I don't see how that changes it.
Well, because they're very fundamentally and importantly different, right? And one, we're saying do you have the right to publicly speak about something, and then the other is, do you have a right to somebody else's private platform? And you're arguing that you should have a right to somebody else's private platform to spread your speech versus just saying you have a right to have the ability to have a voice, right?
Yes.
So you're saying, in addition to just having the ability to speak and to be heard, you also need and should have the right to be heard by a large number of people? You think that's fundamental to...
I don't think I don't think that Facebook should be the deciding factor. I don't think that Facebook should be the one who determines whether or not I, a politically engaged citizen of the United States, should have the ability to reach their user base.
But
I think that the other people of Facebook should decide that.
I mean, the other people of Facebook aren't capital owners in the company. They don't own it. This is why now they could if it was a public utility, because then we all make those decisions, right? Because that's the definition of a public utility. We make laws about it, about how we regulate said public utility.
Sure.
So
the scale is... Sorry, go ahead.
So do you think having private accounts or restricted accounts on social media should be banned too? Because you're restricting people's access to that. Their voices can't be heard. They can't use that platform to the full ability, right?
Sorry, you said restricted accounts?
Like if you restrict access to your account somehow, if you have a private account, if only friends can see your account, do you think that's an issue on this platform? Okay,
if I am on a public sidewalk and I decide to whisper to my friend, that's not whose right would be violated there? What does that mean?
No, I'm saying, what if a public figure blocks you on the internet? Do you think do you think you should be able to block someone on the internet?
Absolutely, you should be able to block somebody on the internet.
But aren't I being denied some sort of access to that?
Wait, what if everybody decides to block you?
It's about the person's right to express themselves.
Okay.
What if everybody decides to block you, though?
Tough luck. What do you mean? That's like if I go to a public sidewalk and everybody decides to ignore me.
That sounds like you're being denied access to a platform in its entirety, then. That's almost as if, every social media site had blocked you, right?
I disagree with that evaluation.
Okay.
How is it? Never mind. I mean, how is it at all the same to say that if every single person decides I don't have a voice worth sharing, then they block me? How is that equivalent to 3 people sitting in chairs in Palo Alto saying Brian shouldn't have the right to talk here?
I mean, they're different things, but don't they lead to the same outcome anyway?
Well, yeah, because you're arguing from an outcome point of view anyway. So that's like saying saying how is it the same thing to say that your freedom of speech is being denied just because you don't have access to Facebook's users? Like, it seems like we're making the same. We're looking for outcomes, right? So if all private platforms banned you, that's effectively silencing your speech. If all users or a large majority of users started to block you, then that would be effectively banning your speech as well. It seems to be the case, or that would seem to be the case.
I don't agree with that.
But it results in the exact same outcome, does it not?
But it's a different input though. It's a different amount of people who are deciding to block me. It's a different, like, if everybody decides to ignore me.
Well,
like
what
Marianne Williamson.
What if like 70% of the users?
That my freedom of speech, like, she still has a platform.
What if 70% of the users on a platform decide that they are okay with like banning hate speech?
Actually, funny story. The free speech support throughout the U.S. actually, there's not a single way you can divide the people of the United States in terms of not being in favor of speech. There's no race way to divide the country. There's no age way to divide the country. There's no gender way to divide the country. Everybody supports free speech in this country.
Yeah, but I'm saying hypothetically, if 51% of users on a platform were okay with like banning, certain types of speech, like hate speech or whatever, you would then be okay with it, or?
No. Look, I believe in democracy. I think that if the people clearly support the freedom of the internet and the freedom of speech, then that should be preserved. Obviously, if we're talking about the decision of people to not like free speech anymore, then we're on a completely different level. Because then I'm advocating for some like obscure personal position of my own, not what is in the public's interest.
Okay, I don't know. It just seems this is like a really messy. I can't get on board with the idea that like you're literally not allowed to ban people.
Appleist, do you understand what I'm advocating for? Do you understand like why I think that it's important that individual rights are preserved, even if the paradigm of public discourse shifts to the internet?
I mean, sure, I do. I just don't think you're applying the correct legal principles to justify it.
Absolutely. I'm okay. I'm okay if my legal case is not 100% built up. I'm fine with that, because at the end of the day, I'm not advocating for what is currently in the law. I'm not advocating. I'm using examples, sure, of similar things.
But the thing is, you're pointing to specific constitutional. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I'm just saying, I'm not talking from a specific legal framework. This should be legal today. I'm saying there are examples that are similar in which people's rights were denied by corporations, and I would like to see more of that mentality, if not more of that legality, in today's current way that we govern the internet.
Okay, but are you done? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, but you're arguing by analogy, right? But the analogy that you're arguing via is really imperfect. Like, you apply a case that had a very narrow holding, and you're trying to extrapolate it to private companies nowadays, which doesn't really work in the same context of the case. And in fact, subsequent case law has shown that
I think he's not trying to make like a legal argument. He just wants to make like the philosophical argument, right? That would be like supported by later laws.
But he's making like a broad constitutional point about the First Amendment. Like that's sort of what ultimate recourse is to, right?
Let me speak with my own words. The point I'm trying to make isn't that the current law supports this. Obviously, it doesn't. Obviously, the CDA doesn't actually, or needs to be strengthened, and that companies need to be more reminded of the fact that what people say on their platform is not like their responsibility. I think that we need to make that much more clear. I think that we need to make it clear to private companies that because we're absolving them of this responsibility, that they are platforms, not publishers. And that means that people have a right to use them as such. Now, it's not saying that they need to be made a public utility. I don't agree with that at all. To this day, I mean, I could, as long as I knew my friend's IP address, I could create some sort of script or something that could like email each other. I could make that all on my own. The only thing I would need would be Windows operating system or any operating system and an internet connection. But we do use these next level things. We use these web browsers. We use these websites. We use all these other aspects And the purpose of doing that is because we're trying to reach more people. We're trying to have a more clean, more friendly interface. All this other, all the benefits of actually using social media. We're trying to also appeal to people who we don't know the IP addresses of. These are the ways that we're communicating with the public. These are the ways that we're expressing our freedom of speech. And the fact that it's not protected is causing, in my opinion, harm. I think that it's causing people to feel censored. I think that it's causing a lack of connection. I think that I don't think that it's good.
Okay. Can I just ask you a non-legal question then?
Sure.
So you said you're a capitalist, and
I am.
You know, I know that you pointed to the CDA is sort of providing a safe harbor for these platforms. That they're not publishers, they are the platform, whatnot, right?
Okay.
Would that be a fair characterization, right? Your argument is, hey, they are a platform, therefore, they should be willing to allow this sort of content on there because the CDA provides that safe harbor, right?
I think that the CDA providing the safe harbor is part of the reason why they should be more willing to not ban people.
Okay, but wouldn't you say, as a capitalist, that one of the fundamental principles of behavioral finance is sort of the perception, a negative perception among shareholders of the general marketplace?
Sorry, when I said I'm a capitalist, I don't mean I align fully with this, with that. What I'm saying is I don't believe in public ownership of all these properties. I don't think that. Okay. I don't think that everything from Windows operating systems to Google Chrome web browsers to Google search to AWS servers, I don't think that all this stuff should be publicly owned. I think that private ownership of these is ultimately a better way to go, but that you do need to enforce fairness through laws.
Right, I understand that, but at the same time, a lot of these companies are publicly owned, right? They're beholden to their shareholders, and if you take the
that's not what publicly owned means.
I mean, you literally have a fiduciary duty to your
Wait, stop.
shareholders.
When he says you guys are talking about two different types of publicly owned. Apple means publicly traded by a board. There's a board of investors and everything. You're saying publicly owned isn't owned by the government. You're talking about two different. Yeah. There you go.
Yes, I am talking about publicly owned as in owned and facilitated and maintained and everything. By the government.
So I mean a publicly traded, publicly listed company, right?
Okay.
That's what I'm referring to. So.
Okay.
So I mean. In that context, you said you're a capitalist. You believe in private ownership, entrepreneurship, whatnot. I mean,
yeah.
How do you sort of reconcile that belief with, the idea that you're allowing all sorts of content on your platform and, the fundamental economic effect that comes, the negative perceptions and the impact that comes from, having that stuff publicized and the impact that will have on your company and your shareholders?
I think that there is more to say about the fairness and the rights of individuals than the shareholders' interests in terms of what the company is doing.
So that seems almost like you're saying that they should be willing to sort of sacrifice their financial stability in the interest of these platforms. Is that right? Or in the interest of allowing this content on those platforms. Is that right? Is that fair?
In the same way to say that if you enforce fairness in an ISP, then they're sacrificing their financial interests, because what they might platform some people and then the public will not use that ISP. I don't really understand your argument here.
So, I mean, ISPs don't have that sort of baseline visibility. No one's going to say, oh, this guy used Comcast to plan some sort of attack or something. Whereas
no. That's wrong. That's wrong. No. That is absolutely wrong. There are these things called national security letters, which the U.S. this is in the U.S. The government uses them to ask ISPs where people went. If there was no stake in this for the ISPs, then they wouldn't do that. And they issue 30,000 of these a year.
I'm familiar with sort of the whole you have the warrant canary, you have all that stuff. I'm familiar with that stuff. What I'm talking about more is in the news, in mainstream perception, there's generally not a lot of discussion about like, oh, these guys planned this attack, via the internet when they used, charter spectrum to communicate, you know, via
Okay.
interstate commerce. Whereas it's a lot easier for someone to say, oh, there was a Facebook group and they got radicalized there, right? I think that's fair to say.
I don't I don't agree with blaming Facebook for that. I think that Facebook, in that case, should push back against that accusation and say, look, the Section 230 of the 1996 Communication Decency Act, blah, 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 says that we are not responsible for the things that are said on our platform, that it is not our job to regulate this. What these people were doing. Now, okay, just to clarify, when you're talking about planning an attack, that is obviously not legal speech. But just ignoring that for a second, Facebook should be able to push back and say what these people were doing was perfectly legal. It was perfectly within their free speech rights, and we just and we preserve that over censorship. That is the route we choose to take. That is the route that we're maybe in the future required to take.
Okay. If that's your viewpoint, fair enough. I think we just fundamentally disagree there. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you? I know that we've been. I don't know how long we've been on this call. I can keep going though with other. I mean, we kind of pushed back on some of the other threats. I can talk more about other aspects of my book though.
Yeah, if you want to,
Absolutely.
yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I have some other like threats here. We were talking more about. Well, we just got done talking about like culture and like communities and how like we're beholden to these companies who are no longer what would you say, local, and that is causing us to feel disconnected. I think that we need to look at we see all these maybe anecdotal, you might call it, or like singular data points about like, oh, tech companies don't let their kids use their tech, or you might say that in the era of tech, people are dying more. Our life expectancy is dropping because of loneliness that leads to suicide, and we don't have close friends anymore, and all this. I think this is a proposal for my book that we should create something like an EPA of tech ethics that would kind of look at what the side effect causes of modern technology are, and then regulate them accordingly. So, like, for example, I don't know what exactly it is that is causing the loneliness to spike the way that it is right now. But I do think that it could be related to the current advances in technology. So what I would want then is like a technocratic solution that says this is the exact cause, like these are the studies that we did, and this is the conclusions that we got to. That's kind of where we were in the 1960s with like the EPA. We were kind of seeing like, okay, we're industrializing and it's kind of hurting the environment in this way and that way. And then as a result, we created the EPA to create these studies and to do these, technical research into what's the best way to regulate it. I think that would be a good idea for the current landscape of technology. We don't really have anybody who's looking into those effects and how they're negatively affecting us and what kind of regulations should be put on that.
Yeah.
Like, you could say we need to ban kids from technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that it seems to be that there are a lot of negative things to go with that. But until you actually do research and like come to the conclusion of what exactly that is and what's the best way to prevent it, you can't. I don't think it's smart to say broad statements like ban, just don't let kids under 13 use it. So.
Sure.
Can I jump in really quick? So what if the outcome there is that there's too much cyberbullying and hate speech on the internet? I mean, would you then be okay with private platforms then banning that speech?
I have no problem giving people the ability to determine which users they are seeing in their feed.
But so you're saying that should be an individualized decision, even if this this EPA of the internet or this tech ethics board decides that cyberbullying in general or abusive behavior on the internet, leads to these outcomes?
Sorry. So what you're asking is if the outcome of creating the EPA of ethics determines that cyberbullying. I mean, that's such a weird hypothetical. I mean, you can't just say, "What if this perfectly encapsulates my point of view from earlier?"
I mean, it's just a complete hypothetical.
Sure. I have no problem giving people the ability to block people. I have no problem giving people to say these are the communities that I'm involved in. These are the communities I'm not involved in. I just think that people should have the right to choose. I trust individuals. I trust individuals even if they're young to make those decisions.
So if you trust the individuals, why do you need a separate ethics board to determine, what's okay on the internet then? I'm just a little confused.
Because we can see a lot of bad things are happening in terms of loneliness and suicide. Look, okay, if we're going to make these hypothetical arguments that just strengthen our case, what if I said that the Tech Ethics Board reveals that the disconnectedness that one feels from being censored online leads in 99% of cases to them committing suicide later? Huh? What about that? It's why are we even here? What point are we making?
I mean, if they said that, then you would probably just say, well, they're a private corporation and they're not protected under the First Amendment.
But what I'm saying is that's leading to 99% suicide rate.
Okay.
Under this hypothetical, which is just a hypothetical, by the way.
Okay, then, I would say, based on that, maybe these private companies should enact policies to better them, whether that be, preventing people from being blocked or whatnot. Maybe they should implement them.
To block companies from censoring people.
Yeah, maybe these private companies who, can make those decisions on their own, maybe they should do that.
Okay, well, then it seems like in some hypotheticals in which things are extreme that we agree with each other. And on this case, and probably the same case in your case, if it turns out that cyberbullying for people who are too young or really can't handle like hitting the block button or whatever, then yeah, I might be more in agreement with creating that, but that hasn't been proven by any means, and there hasn't been a study on it, and we don't have an EPA of what I have called the EPA of tech ethics to even research this.
Wow, good job, guys. Wait, hello?
Hello.
Oh,
sorry.
No, that's fine. What do you what do you
ahead.
think is like the closest or nearest like thing that would be like achievable right now that you would like think people should do? Like what's like a thing that we should like move towards that's like easily achievable right now that we have the political capital to do that you think most people would be on board with?
I think that we should establish. Well, first of all, I think that we should reestablish net neutrality as it was. It's been passed in the U.S. House.
Mm-hmm.
It has not been passed in the U.S. Senate. It has not been signed into law by the president after it was rolled back. I think that is because 80% of the country agrees with the principles of net neutrality.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like a slam dunk way to say, look, Congress, regulators, whatever, we see your problem. We want to do it. I think that we need to, this is a thread that I didn't get to really actualizing, but I'll just say, I think that we need to look at how our military is defending us against cyber threats.
Mm-hmm.
Because what we see is Russia has 1/10 of our military budget, but they're able to infiltrate our social media, our public discourse, and all these things in an attacking fashion. And there's really no response from the U.S. military. So I think that we should allocate more of our budget to cyber defense against that kind of grassroots thing. That's actually a proposal by Senator Warner, who is a senator from Virginia. He actually proposed that one. I think that would be something a really good goal to go for. I think that we need to make surveillance tools more apparent. I think that they need to be more clear in what they do. Like, if I turn off location tracking, why is my location still being tracked? And then Google says, oh, well, we're still tracking your location via your IP, but we're not tracking you via GPS.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that that's a problem. I think that people need to be more clear on those things. I think that we need to discourage that sort of design where people are kind of faked out by the functionality and said, okay, well, I clicked the do not track button in my Google Chrome browser, but why am I still being tracked across the internet? Because sorry, I think it let me see here. I thought I had this written down. 75% of Americans want a way to browse the internet without being tracked. And some of them are using the do not track feature to try to do that, but do not track
It's
feature
almost
is simply
impossible. You have to download it's like Ghostery and NoScript, and there's like 6 different add-ons that you have to actually download. If you actually, because I understand what you're saying. Like if I say don't track me, it's okay, but some sites might be building like private like shadow accounts off of you. Like even if you're not logged in, even if you're in incognito, they can track you in other ways. That like it seems like it's really hard to just turn that off.
Yeah, absolutely. Features like incognito and like I was saying before, the do not track feature, they are total misnomers. They and like when you turn off location services, it's a total misnomer to pretend that is actually doing something. And I think that needs, Apple literally removed the do not track feature from Safari because it wasn't doing anything. People weren't honoring it. So other things that we can do, obviously, I think in line with that, we need to opt in, or sorry, we need to do a better job with like opt-in consent to use services. And that sort of thing. I think in line with that, we also need to ban things like, or do a better job of regulating. I shouldn't say ban specific things, but do a better job of regulating the constant monitoring tools of surveillance capitalism. So the ability to track people, and the ability to integrate constant monitoring into contracts. So like if you take something like I said before, Drive Safe and Save. If you take something like Drive Safe and Save and you realize that this whole business model is based on a permanent violation of this person's privacy, then you should regulate it accordingly. That could be something that we could do right now.
Okay, yeah. I don't think I necessarily disagree.
Here.
I think some American version of as much as people shout on it, I don't think the GDPR was a bad thing. And some of the protections provided in that I think were pretty nice. Like I've gotten a lot of emails from people, like telling me that they have to delete an account because it's really old, accounts that I didn't even know that I had anymore and whatnot. So I don't know. I think that kind of stuff is pretty nice. Yeah.
I think that we should, obviously we've talked about this a lot. I think that we should rewrite the CDA so that online platforms not only are absolved from the responsibility to not remove legal speech, but also can't remove legal speech. I think online platforms should be transparent about like how they're creating things like search results. I think that like we didn't really even talk about this, but like the algorithms that we're dealing with here can be super biased and super tricky, and we can get into things like Google says, oh, we're not picking out search results for specific search results, and then 2 days later there's an article on Slate saying we asked Google to manipulate this search result, and they did, or we asked YouTube. In that case, it was. The article from Slate is, sorry, just to be specific about that example, because I kind of just pulled it out of nowhere. In December of 2018, Sundar Pichai testified before Congress that they do not do specific search result manipulation, and then like 2 days later, an article from Slate from a woman named April Glazer came out and said, YouTube was pushing too much pro-life content on abortion results, and we asked them to change it, and they did. So that just to be clear about that example, I think that platforms should be more transparent about how those results are compiled and whatever.
Sure.
Another thing, I mean, there's a ton of topics in my book. I'm just kind of like I'm literally scrolling through my book right now. I think that facial recognition should be more heavily regulated. The way that it's used today is really, it's really kind of like a make your own rules, be your own be your own judge about whether or not it's ethical or not. And what we've seen as a result of that is companies like Apple will literally say, we don't trust the government not to use this in a bad or evil way, but we're still going to use it ourselves. And the question there is, why is the government necessarily going to use it for something evil, but you're not? And just to clarify, facial recognition is not the only algorithmic way to read biometric data. There's also things like gait trackers, that GAIT trackers, which literally walk record and analyze how a person walks, so that if they were like to see them on like a CCTV camera, it could be like, oh, that's Brian. He's a walker. Like that's how he walks. Sorry, I said that weird. There's also things like cameras are becoming high enough resolution that they can read fingerprints now. Cameras are becoming high enough resolution that they can read like the iris pattern,
I've been
which is
reading
also
retinas for a while. Yeah.
well, the retina's in the back of the eye, which makes it a little bit harder. But
Oh, never mind. I'm sorry.
the iris,
Yeah,
is
whichever
actually
thing is
another
responsible for unlocking like screens. Like I know that I
Yep.
saw a demonstration like 5 or 6 years ago where you could you can like unlock people's like eye scanners or whatever. I thought they were called retinal scanners, but it must be. I guess it's the other part where you can just like take a picture of somebody and use that because the resolutions on cameras are so high now on phones.
Yeah. So we need to look at not only who has all this data, like who has the database full of people's faces, right? An EFF report, which is the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which is pretty big on like internet like fairness and privacy advocation. They had a report that said that the FBI has access to a database that has 50% of the U.S. population's face in it. So if the FBI wants to facially recognize someone in the U.S., they have a 50. The database that they'd be looking at has half the faces in it, which is an insane amount. You need to ask, how did you get all these faces? Who authorized you to have this technology, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, we can go into as much details as we want. I mean, do you have like a time limit, or I know that we've been going for an hour and a half now.
Hit me up with one more topic and then we'll call it a day.
Okay. like I told you when we were messaging, I could talk about this stuff. Let me see here. Oh, this kind of goes in line with what we were talking about in terms of engaging with people publicly or like on the internet. We're really losing our cohesion and like our identity and everything. And I think a lot of the reason why that is because we're not being, I mean, this is going to sound cheesy, but like we're not being nice to each other online. You come online, you say one wrong thing, you're a Nazi. You say one wrong thing, you're a socialist. Like we're so driven to like drive people out and to like disregard that we're not really thinking about how that's impacting people. Like I said before, I don't really know if it's the cause of one thing or another, but the fact is that we are becoming more and more lonely in a time period where we're more and more connected by the internet. There's 3 billion people on the internet, but I think 43% of millennials say they have no close friends. Or sorry, 43% think that they feel isolated, and 27% think no one understands them. So it really is, like a I'm 14 and this is deep paradox, where you have these. We're so connected, but we're so far apart. Sorry to be cheesy, but I think that the internet's connectivity is necessarily a good thing. Take, for example, the issue of immigration. Okay, in 1994, I think this is Pew, 63% said that immigrants are a burden on our country. In 2019, 62% say immigrants strengthen our economy. I think that is absolutely a positive outcome of things like the internet. We're connecting to people. We're understanding more ideas. We're losing, unhelpful biases. The same type of statistic goes for same-sex marriage. 27% of people supported it in 1996. I think that the Defense of Marriage Act was passed like only a couple years after. Today, 63% of people support it. I think that's absolutely something like that's worth celebrating. When we get exposed to these ideas, we're becoming more socially aware. We're becoming more progressive socially, and I think that we should continue to champion that. But when we see that it ends up with us also feeling alone and stuff. We need to examine, how are we conducting ourselves online? How are we making, broad claims about people based on one or two interactions? How are we presenting ourselves in ways that are not true? A problem that the youngest generation, the Zoomers, are having is they see
Wait, hello? Hello?
Hey, buddy. I think he might have dropped. I don't know.
Maybe he saw too much.
Maybe Facebook got him.
Oh, I'm sorry. When did I stop talking?
Oh, you said something about we'll see, and then after that it cut out. Maybe for like 10 seconds.
10 seconds. Okay, sorry.
No problem.
I think that I was playing with my push to talk.
Oh, no problem.
So what I was saying is the youngest generation, the Zoomers, they're having this problem right now when they want the government to they want protection online, I think, ultimately, because what they're seeing is this huge risk in saying what they feel online, and they see this as, if I say something here when I'm 13 and I'm applying for a job 10 years later, that's going to come back to me. And I think that the government has a role to play in making sure that people aren't punished for that. People aren't punished for sending nudes. People aren't punished for for saying stupid things, for making stupid jokes on Twitter. And I think that when you take off threats like that, and I also think, like I said before, when you take off things like, or when you start to prosecute more broadly things like doxing and cyber stalking, when you start to take away the threats of, like, well, if I am open and I'm honest about myself online, I could end up hurting in the future. I think that that'll ultimately lead to more openness on the internet, and that might help us with our feelings of isolation.
Yeah, maybe, sure. Yeah, I mean, like, our engagement with social media is like really fucked, so.
Well, yeah, but it's not just our engagement with social media. I mean, on here, on Discord, I mean, how often do you, like, it really, and I'm not necessarily advocating for like a change on this, right? But how many times have you seen someone, like, do like a search on Discord, like, you can literally type from username,
Yeah, to find stuff that somebody said
FAG,
like 7 years
and then
ago,
like,
and then,
oh my
yeah,
gosh,
yeah,
look how bad
it
they
happens
are.
all
It's
the
like,
time in
come
this
on,
world,
that's,
yeah, for sure.
I don't use that word, just to clarify, but like, that's not a reason not to be friends with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that that's bad behavior, and part of the reason why we're feeling disconnected right now is because of our inability to make friends in an honest, like, fashion.
Sure.
So I know that we said that would be the last one. So anyway, guys, my name is Brian Wolatz, and I wrote a book. It's called The Gig Society. It's about all the threats that we're going to face with the modern, like, how technology is changing our lives, our society, our culture, our values. And I hope that you'll buy it. It's available, if you can search it, just search The Gig Society. You'll find it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, your local bookstore. The Kindle version is $3.99. So it's less than $5, keeping it cheap. If you want that, it'll be out February 4th.
All right, thanks a lot. Well, hey, good luck, buddy, with your book. And then if you ever hear me talk about something that you, like, very specifically, like, either agree or disagree with, yeah, you could always, like, shoot me an email, whatever, we can chat about it.
Okay, yeah,
Right,
sure.
cool. Thanks a lot. Good luck, man.
All right, have a good day.
Bye. Okay. I feel like it was like a... Never mind. It was okay. I feel like it was a big conversation. Like, here's like 52 different, like, pretty, like, understandable problems in society. And then, yeah. It wasn't bad, I guess. Want to know if I love black people again? Is that?
Oh, that's a good question. Do you love black?
I love black people, Jesse.
Do you love white people?
I love white people too.
Do you love the Jews?
I love all people, Jesse. I got love in my heart for everybody.
How about the Jews?